General Sani Abacha, 1943 to 98. Former military dictator and commander-in-chief of armed forces who ruled Nigeria from 1993 until his mysterious death on June 8, 1998. A career military man, Abacha was born in Kano and began his military training at the age of 19. It was he who announced the overthrow of the Second Republic in 1983 when Muhammadu Buhari came to power, and he was the number 2 soldier during the Babangida administration. In November 1993, he overthrew the existing interim council of Ernest Shonikan and declared himself head of state. Over the next 5 years, Abacha battled pro-democracy groups and widespread international disapproval over his refusal to recognize the result of the 1993 election and his fierce clampdown on anti-government activism.
That in spite of these overtures and good gestures by government, Chief MKO Abiola flagrantly perpetuated acts which breached the laws of the land, but government in its magnanimity never gave him serious attention.
Abacha has been most vilified for the execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa and other members of the Ogoni Nine. Under Abacha's rule, Nigeria became an international pariah state and the country's economic crisis peaked. Chief Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, 1937 to 98. Born in Abeokuta and educated at the University of Glasgow, Abiola was a Yoruba man who became one of the wealthiest businessmen in Nigeria. His companies covered newspaper publishing, banking, air transportation, oil drilling, and the book trade. Through his wealth, Abiola also became one of the leading philanthropists in Nigeria. He had been an important backer of the National Party of Nigeria (NPN) government during the Second Republic and won the nomination of the Social Democratic Party (SDP) to stand for the presidency in the election of June 12, 1993. Abiola won the election, but the results were annulled when Abiola declared himself president. Anyway, a year later, head of state Sani Abacha had him put in prison, where he died 4 years later. Chinua Achebe, 1930, author of many important books, including Things Fall Apart, A Man of the People, No Longer at Ease, Arrow of God, and Ant Hills of the Savannah. Achebe has become one of the most famous novelists in Africa. Born at Ogidi in eastern Nigeria, Achebe worked as a broadcaster from 1954 to 1967 when he became a professor at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. As an eloquent portrayer and critic of the existential crisis facing Africa and Africans over the last 2 centuries, Achebe has spoken and worked throughout the world since the 1970s. Major General Aguiyi Ironsi Umunnakwe, 1924 to 66. One of Nigeria's most distinguished soldiers of the 1950s and 1960s, Aguiyi Ironsi served as an equerry to Queen Elizabeth II on her royal visit to Nigeria in 1956 and as military advisor to the Nigerian High Commission in London in 1961, and was the first African commander of the United Nations peacekeeping force in the Congo crisis. In 1965, he was promoted to Major General and became the General Commanding Officer of the Nigerian Army. After the first military coup of 1966, Ironsi, as the most senior military officer, became the first military head of state of Nigeria, but only for a few months, after angering many, particularly Northerners, over his perceived favoritism of Igbos and abolition of federal structure. He was killed in the second military coup in July 1966. Chief S.L. Akintola, 1910 to 66. Born in Ogbomosho, Akintola's first career was as a journalist. At one point, he served as editor of the Daily Service, the newspaper of the Nigerian youth movement, and he became heavily involved in nationalist politics, particularly in the Yoruba-dominated Egbe, Omo Oduduwa, and the Action Group, serving as deputy leader of the latter from 1955 to 1962 and as premier of the Western Region from 1959 to 1966 after a falling out with Chief Obafemi Awolowo in 1962. Akintola abandoned the AG and founded the United People's Party (UPP) and later the Nigerian National Democratic Party (NNDP), which formed an alliance with the Northern-dominated NPC government and used the power of incumbency to rig elections in 1964 and 1965. The chaos in the Western region resulting from the 1965 election was one of the main factors that led to the military coup of January 15, 1966. Akintola was killed in the coup. Chief Obafemi Awolowo, 1909 to 87, founder of the Egbe, Omo Oduduwa, and the Action Group, both Yoruba-dominated organizations that pushed for Nigerian independence and the extension and preservation of Yoruba interests and culture in a multi-ethnic federated Nigeria. He studied law and commerce in London in the mid-1940s and returned to Nigeria to practice law and politics. Awolowo contested the post of Prime Minister in the 1959 general election, but AG lost to the NPC-NCN coalition, and Awolowo became the leader of the opposition. After his falling out with Western Region Premiers S.L. Akintola in 1962, Awolowo was charged with corruption and treason and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was later pardoned by General Yakubu Gowon and became a federal office holder in the military regime. He ran for the presidency of the Second Republic in 1979 and 1983, but lost both times to Shehu Shagari. He died in May 1987. Nnamdi Azikiwe, 1904 to 96, founder of the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, later Nigerian Citizens, which became one of the largest parties vying for independence for a unified Nigeria from British colonial rule. Azikiwe was born in Zungeru in northern Nigeria to Igbo parents and was educated in several mission schools throughout Nigeria. He traveled to the United States for university education. When he became involved in the Pan-African movement, on his return to Nigeria, he became a successful journalist and activist in the Nigerian youth movement before breaking away and founding the NCNC in 1944. As its leader, Azikiwe became the first indigenous governor general of Nigeria in 1959 and its first ceremonial president in 1963. He was ousted from this position by the coup of January 15, 1966, but he never retired from politics, running unsuccessfully for president in both 1979 and 1983. The National Airport in Abuja, the country's capital, is named after him. General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, 1941. Born at Minna in what is now Niger State, Babangida was trained at many different military institutions and held many different military posts in his career. He first rose to national prominence for his efforts in quashing the abortive coup of Lieutenant Colonel B. Sukadimka in February 1976, in which General Murtala Muhammad was assassinated. In 1984, he became Chief of Army Staff, a position he held until August 27, 1985, when he mounted the successful coup that removed Muhammadu Buhari from power. Babangida became president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces and ruled Nigeria until 1993. Babangida was responsible for the institution of the structural adjustment program in the country, which brought economic hardship for many Nigerians, as well as for the complicated transition to civil rule, which resulted in his annulment of the results of the presidential election of June 12, 1993. Babangida handed power to an interim governing council on August 27, 1993, but has since remained influential in Nigerian politics. Alhaji Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, 1912 to 66. Born in Tafawa Balewa town in what is now Bauchi State, Balewa trained to become a teacher. Receiving his teaching certificate in 1933, he taught at Bauchi Middle School. After studying at the Institute of Education at the University of London, became an education officer for Bauchi province. He was one of the founding members of the Northern People's Congress, which became the largest and the most powerful party in northern Nigeria, and which won control of the federal legislature in the 1959 general elections. Balewa became the first prime minister of Nigeria and governed during the tumultuous First Republic. His power and promotion of the northernization agenda made him a prime target for the organizers of the coup of January 15, 1966, in which he was abducted and killed. The Saldana of Sokoto, Ahmadu Bello, 1910 to 66. A grandson of Usman Dan Fodio, Bello became the most important northern politician between 1940s and the 1960s. Although he lost a bid to become the Sultan of Sokoto in 1938, he was named the Saldana, which means war leader. A very important position. He went on to become a founding member and leader of the NPC and the premier of the Northern Nigeria in 1954. Along with Prime Minister Balewa, Bello was instrumental in promoting the northernization agenda of the NPC-dominated First Republic. He was killed in the coup of January 15, 1966, which ended the First Republic.